Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Monday, the 4th of November in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make a final dash across swing states as markets prepare for volatility.
Rachel Reeves concedes that she underestimated the UK's budget gap as James Dyson describes her tax hikes as growth killing.
Plus, promising big gains from even bigger losses. We take a closer look at Novo Nordisk's Ozempic Successor.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
With one day left until Election Day in the United States, the race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump remains on a knife edge. The presidential election looks set for a photo finish, with polls showing voters narrowly split both nationally and across pivotal swing states. Speaking to supporters in Georgia, former President Trump offered this message on what to expect if he wins.
We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. You watch. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so much fun. It'll be nasty a little bit at times, and maybe at the beginning in particular, but it's going to be something.
Speaking at another rally in Pennsylvania, the Republican nominee used large parts of his speech to suggest, without evidence, that the election system, polling firms and media were corrupt and conspiring against his campaign.
Notably, Vice President Kamala Harris chose not to mention Trump by name during her speech at a church in Detroit, Michigan. However, the focus of her comments was clear.
While we know there are those who seek to deepen division, sow hate, spread fear, and cause chaos, this moment in our nation has to be about so much more than partisan politics.
Kamala Harris speaking there. Sunday's New York Times Siena survey shows Harris ahead in 5 of the 7 likely swing states. ABC's 538 election model, which uses polling, economic and demographic data to explore likely election outcomes, suggests that Trump has a slight edge with a 53% chance of winning. Now, we will have full rolling coverage across Bloomberg Radio on results night, with the latest updates available via our News Now audio casts on Apple, Spotify, Alexa and the Bloomberg website.
The historically tight polling data has led investors to walk back bets on Donald Trump winning the US election. The dollar has weakened today on the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index after hitting a 4-month high last week. That's as survey data showed no clear advantage for either candidate in the final few hours of the campaign. Last week, Bloomberg calculated that hedge funds, asset managers and other speculators held some $17.8 billion in bullish greenback positions as part of a so-called dollar Trump trade.
The price of oil has risen after OPEC Plus delayed an increase in production, and tensions in the Middle East continue to weigh on markets. Brent crude rose by as much as 2% as the group of oil-producing countries agreed to hold supplies steady in December. They pushed back a planned increase of 180,000 barrels to January. It comes as Iran stepped up its rhetoric against Israel, and the Wall Street Journal reported an Iranian attack would come after tomorrow's US presidential election, but before January's inauguration.
In the UK, Chancellor Rachel Reeves says she was wrong to tell British voters there would be no new tax increases. Reeves's comments during the election campaign have come under greater scrutiny since last week's budget, where she set out £40 billion of new levies. The Chancellor was asked by journalists why people should trust her.
I was wrong on the 11th of June. When I arrived at the Treasury, I was taken into a room by the senior officials at the Treasury, and they set out the huge black hole in the public finances beyond which anybody knew about.
Rachel Reeves there defending her budget, which sparked a 2-day sell-off in the bond market. The government's tax and spending plans have come under fire from Britain's richest man, James Dyson. He wrote in the Times newspaper that the very fabric of our economy is being ripped apart. Dyson's been an outspoken voice on UK policy for many years. He backed Brexit and subsequently moved his company's headquarters to Singapore.
Kemi Badenoch has won the leadership of Britain's Conservative Party. The first black woman to hold the role, Badenoch won with 57% of valid votes. She says it's time for change.
Our party is critical to the success of our country. But to be heard, we have to be honest. Honest about the fact that we made mistakes. Honest about the fact that we let standards slip. The time has come to tell the truth.
Badenoch takes over a party reeling from its worst election defeat in modern history. After 14 years in power, the Conservatives have only 121 seats in the UK Parliament, down from 365 5 years ago.
Just some breaking news this hour. Ryanair has cut its passenger growth target for the coming year because of delivery delays from its aircraft supplier, Boeing. Europe's largest budget carrier now expects 210 million passengers in the fiscal year 2026, down from a previous goal of 215 million. Ryanair is among airlines waiting for planes from Boeing, which is facing production quality issues as well as a workers' strike.
The Spanish Prime Minister had to be rushed away from an angry mob surrounding him whilst visiting a flood-affected area. Pedro Sanchez and Spain's King Felipe faced crowds chanting "murderer" and throwing objects in the city of Paiporta. The country's leader admits that more needs to be done.
I'm aware that the response that is being given is not enough. I know that we have to do better and that we have to give our all. But I also know that we have to do it together.
Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez speaking there via a translator. Flash floods have killed at least 211 people in Spain, and criticism is mounting about the government's handling of the crisis.
Those are your top stories on the markets. Friday saw a late-stage rebound on stocks on Wall Street. The S&P 500 closed up 0.4%. The Nasdaq added 0.7%. And Treasury 10-year yields rose by 10 basis points. Today in Asia, though, the dollar has weakened. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is 0.6 weaker. Treasury futures have rebounded in price. Yields sink. They look poised to erase Friday's losses as we look at Bitcoin as well. Weaker this morning, 0.3%.
Now, in a moment, we'll bring you more on the final countdown in the US election campaign, plus the next big thing from the drugs company Novo Nordisk. But first, something from Bloomberg's new weekend edition that we've been reading about. Running marathons can make you a better person. This made all of us wonder a little bit. It was an amazing insight, though, into the life of a long-distance runner. This is Sabrina Little. She's a philosophy professor at Christopher Newton University in the US. She is also a 5-time US national champion ultra runner.
Now, I would say don't let that put you off, because my problem, I had to read this twice because the first time I read it, it just sort of annoyed me. It made me feel bad about myself because I kind of, everything.
You can't compete with that kind of running.
Everything in moderation philosophy that I try to live my life by does not apply to the argument that that Sabrina Little is making in this piece. But I mean, I think the interesting parts that I took away from it were, first of all, the idea of particularly long distance running being very good for helping control your emotions. And she points out this idea that, if you let yourself get overwhelmed while doing something like this, your run is ruined, essentially. Yeah. So I found that quite interesting. But also the idea of, get kind of understanding that your emotions can be wrong, and that's perhaps runs countercultural to what we have.
Yes, I thought that was a very interesting point. And obviously, she talks about, really the whole of her life actually being a runner, which I thought was fascinating, how she received an education on the hill that she ran up and down countless times when she was at graduate school, and that it really shaped her character and how she trained other young runners at a local school, and discussing all of this. And she sort of refers to basically the philosophy of life, how to live a good life, and
you
how
don't
to
have to be a long distance runner to do it, which I think is the key part, or be a kind of lauded philosopher either. Anyway, well worth your time if you do get a time to read it. Let's bring you more down now, though, on our top story, and this, of course, the final hours of campaigning in the US presidential race. A flurry of polls on Sunday showing a close race, with Harris having a slight edge nationally and in some swing states. We've got our senior editor Bill Ferries with us for more on this. Bill, talk us through what the polls show. Looks like a photo finish.
Yeah, it still does, absolutely. But very interesting polls coming in over the weekend. And it's hard to know at this point how much you can really read into any single poll. But what we have seen so far from the New York Times Siena is Kamala Harris up slightly in states like Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Her and Trump tied essentially in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Trump ahead in Arizona by 4 points. But by and large, all of these gaps are still within the margin of error. And I think, as you mentioned a little earlier on your broadcast, that is probably playing into the market's reaction in terms of where this election may be headed.
Yeah, every investor's looking for an edge. Trump trades are being wound back a little bit. Have markets flipped to thinking there may be more of a possibility for Harris?
I don't think we're seeing a flip at this point, but we are seeing, let's just call it a little more caution about how tight this is and where it might go. I think a week or 2 weeks ago, there was a feeling that Trump had been on a little bit of a roll. I think that shifted against him in recent days, and these poll results over the weekend are adding to that. I mean, you've mentioned there's been a little bit of a rally in treasuries. Bitcoin is now under 70,000. It was up well over that last week. So, the Bitcoin is also part of that Trump trade. So I think there's a little bit more caution as we, head into basically the final, 24, 36 hours before people go in for Election Day.
How are the candidates playing it in these crucial final hours?
Well, first of all, they're basically only going to be in the critical swing states that we've been talking about for months now. We saw Kamala Harris doing rallies and visiting small businesses across Michigan, targeting black voters in particular, but also trying to make sure she keeps a grip on Arab American and Muslim voters, who are a particularly important bloc in Michigan. Both sides pitching their economic plans. You saw Trump basically hitting Pennsylvania and North Carolina in the final day here or so. What their pitch is economically is a little different depending on the candidate, of course. Harris is talking about her tax breaks for small businesses and benefits for new first-time homeowners. And Trump is out there talking a lot about, he's talking about his tariffs, and he's talking about immigration in the sense that he has repeated this message that he says immigrants are taking jobs from Black Americans and Hispanic Americans. So we're just about, less than 2 days now from finding out whose arguments on the economy, the top issue for voters, will really win the day.
Bill, thank you so much for being with us. Bloomberg's Bill Ferries. Now, Novo Nordisk, the company behind the so-called miracle weight loss drug Ozempic, says that its new product will be even more effective. But if the new obesity drug does everything the company says it will, Novo may still struggle to actually deliver enough to meet patient demand. Joining us now from Berlin is our pharmaceutical correspondent, Naomi Kresge, on this story. Naomi, good morning. Next generation medicine, it's so important to Novo Nordisk. Why?
Yeah, this is really a story about competition. I mean, Novo obviously has a very successful weight loss medicine in Wegovy, but there are a lot of competitors hot on its heels. There, in studies so far, an Eli Lilly drug has, not comparative studies, but in sort of side-by-side studies, the Lilly drug appears to have even more weight loss than Wegovy. And so Novo is trying to get ahead of the game with something that can help people lose even more weight. And we're expecting to see these clinical trial results coming by the end of this year.
How effective has the company said that this drug, CagriSema, can be?
Novo has said repeatedly that they expect more than 25% weight loss from CagriSema. And so this is really the hurdle that our investors are expecting this medicine to clear.
And when will we find out whether it works?
So they are predicting that the first really big clinical trial of this medicine will come by the end of the year, most likely in December. So we could be seeing it closer to the end of the year. There are additional studies that are being done as well. And Novo's earnings are coming up actually this week on the 6th. So investors will be looking also for a little bit of language and positioning, I think, from the company at that time.
What sort of concerns are there among investors about this development and this move towards this new medicine?
I think the issue is really whether they're able to clear the bar that they've set for themselves. They have been extremely positive about CagriSema in the past, and they've, repeatedly said that it'll help patients lose at least 25% of their body weight. That would make it the most effective treatment yet. People are expecting success, and sometimes when success is really anticipated, the downside, if it doesn't work, is bigger than the potential upside. And this is something that analysts from UBS pointed to last month, and something that investors have been concerned about coming into this really big binary event toward the end of the year.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.